New Level Cap podcast is a show about fun, friends, game design, and all things otherwise. Your hosts are Marco DeSantos and Brad Telton of Level 99 Games. I'm Chris Solis, your producer, and without further ado, please enjoy the show.
What's up, Marco? It's your boy, Brad.
Oh yeah, homies. Yes, welcome.
Team Skull Pose.
Yeah, Team Skull Pose. I love Team Skull. My favorite Team Rocket team is Team Skull for sure.
They're the best Team Rocket.
Oh my gosh, they're not actually Team Rocket, but you know what we mean, listener. Welcome to the New Level Cap podcast. It's me, your boy Guzma,
and me, Brad Telton.
Yeah. Brad, can we make it very clear that I am not actually Guzma?
Yeah, you're definitely not Guzma.
I wish I was. Yeah, that luscious white hair, that awesome.
But
Pokemon.
you're the Guzma of this podcast.
I see. Wait. Are you calling me a criminal?
A smooth criminal.
You've been hit by. You know what, Brad? I'm really excited for today's episode. So excited that I decided to go complete OG gangster on you by becoming a Guzma.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about one of my favorite games in your library, or rather in our library.
What game is that, Marco?
Well, this Level 99 Games game... Okay, wait. Before we head on, sorry. Brad, quick clarification. Is it a Level 99 Games game, or a Level 99 game?
It is... I don't know.
Oh,
wow.
Oh no! No! Even Brad doesn't know. That means we're doomed.
It's a Level 99 Games game because the company's name is Level 99 Games.
Okay. All right. So,
but you can call it a Level 99 game, and we won't get mad.
I see. Okay. So, can I call it an L99G squared game?
Why the square?
Because there's two G's, like game. So G squared is two G's.
Yeah, but then you said game again at the end. Yeah, you said L99G squared game, which is a Level 99's game.
All right, okay, all right, fine. Can I call it L99G squared?
Sure.
Nice.
Sure. Do whatever you want.
All right, so the L99G squared we're going to be talking about today is Pixel Tactics. Bow, 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 bow. That's like an air horn sound, I guess.
Yeah, I could totally see that once you told me.
Yeah, of course, because I have a great Foley artist. So, Brad, Pixel Tactics. I have a quick question for you for people who might be listening to this podcast and have zero idea what we're talking about. Brad, what is Pixel Tactics? Please illuminate our listeners, because I'm super excited.
So, Pixel Tactics is a standalone card game for 2 players. You take a deck of cards that are Pixel Tactics cards, not poker cards or Battlecon cards, but actual Pixel Tactics cards. You take those cards, and through the mechanics of the game, you put them onto the table in various configurations. And the places that you put the cards onto the table changes what they do. Some characters do different things in the front than in the back, and different things in the middle of the field. Also, each character can become a leader. You put them in the middle of your unit, and they become super powerful. And if you can defeat the enemy leader, you win. So you only get one leader every game. Mm-hmm. And everybody can also do an order, which is kind of like a summon. They jump in, they do their thing, and then they leave. So it's a one-time effect, but orders are quite powerful. And you use your heroes and your orders and your leaders and your own strategic acumen and try and take down the opponent's leader before they do the same to you. And did I mention that the decks are symmetric, so both players play with the same cards. So it really does come down to how you leverage your leader's power against your opponent's leader and your tactics to win.
Yes. I think I want to make it very clear that though the decks are symmetric, your leaders are not, right? Because the leader gets chosen at the start of the game. And since you draw cards randomly from the top of a deck, it's very unlikely that you and the opponent will end up with the same leader. So that's very interesting.
In fact, there's actually a rule that you can't play the same leader.
Well,
if you get the same one, then you have to switch.
That's actually not completely true. Because
we took that out, didn't we? In the original Pixel Tactics, that was the rule.
Yes, but it's not completely true anymore.
I say original because this game first came out in the minigame library when it was a single talk box game. And it was probably the most complex of the games in our minigame library, which launched in 2013. But it was the most loved as well. And so people loved it so much, we ended up doing Pixel Tactics 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and Deluxe, and there's some mini packs and a bunch of playmats.
Yeah.
A bunch of promo cards, there's 80 promo cards.
Don't forget we also updated Pixel Tactics 1 to be
Mm-hmm.
to not be the small tuck box anymore. It became its own thing, right?
Right, now it stands alone.
Yeah, now it stands alone. And I think this episode is going to be us talking about how that transition went, right? How Pixel Tactics went from being that single small tuck box that looks like a 52 card deck box into the full series of products that it is now, and some of the challenges that we've experienced over the course of doing that.
Because there are certainly some challenges and some growing pains for this game.
Oh yeah, speaking of growing pains, let's make it very clear. In the original standalone game, and in a lot of the other products that came afterwards, Pixel Tactics is a game played with symmetric decks, right? So balance is a bit different in Pixel Tactics because of the fact that if something is broken, both players get access to it, which means that it is always quote-unquote balanced, right?
To some degree.
Yes, to some degree. Of course, if a card just says instantly win the game on it, then it just becomes a case of who draws that card first. And then, sure, it's balanced, but also it's not fun, right? So the main thing about Pixel Tactics is that we're often balancing things not because it would make the win rates of a player higher or lower, but simply because we want to make it so that other avenues of play become more viable. Because if one is just the dominant strategy, then what's the point of playing Pixel Tactics, a game about, tactics and strategy?
Well, once you discover the dominant strategy, the game is over. And this kind of goes back to what I've always said, about where the game exists between discovery and mastery. And so once we achieve mastery, then it's not fun to play anymore. And so our goal as designers is to keep the goal line of complete mastery as far in the distance as possible.
Yeah.
And we've done that in various ways over the years with Pixel Tactics, because with Pixel Tactics, that line was discovered fairly quickly. There were cards that were just too good or that could instantly win you the game in combination.
Can I list some of them off for the fans who may not know what they are?
I think some of the fans, perhaps, who lived in those days may get a bit nostalgic.
Yeah, I mean,
if you talk about them.
Sure, let's talk about them. To just give those fans a little bit of nostalgia, there is a order from a card called the Berserker, which allows every hero in Melee to perform an attack, which basically won you the game because all you had to do was have 3 things attack the enemy leader in one turn, and then they instantly die, because most leaders have around maybe 20-ish to 15 health, and then all of your heroes have 4 to 5 attack. So you can see how that gets really crazy immediately. And of course, this one's not nostalgic because it's still actually in the game. Scientist, which is the Luke hero, has an order that gives you just 3 extra or 4 extra actions for your turn. So it essentially is Time Walk. You get to take an extra turn.
Yeah, you take an extra turn.
Yeah.
It's pretty mean. And even if you just use it to draw cards, it's pretty gross.
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting. It's banned in competitive play for a reason.
Yeah. And the Berserker, eventually, the heroes could no longer attack leaders. They can only attack other heroes.
Yes.
So that's how we fix that. Really, this is, I think, where we really learned to balance games with Pixel Tactics, and where we learned the right and the wrong ways to balance a game after cards already exist.
One of the challenges that we've had is when we started to introduce the constructed variant, right? Because in the constructed variant, most of the Pixel Tactics sets were balanced as individual things. Like Pixel Tactics 2 was Pixel Tactics 2. You weren't playing Pixel Tactics 2 decks against Pixel Tactics 3 decks, or you weren't mixing cards from Pixel Tactics 1 with Pixel Tactics 3, or Pixel Tactics 4, or so on.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a problem. Until we decided, hey, the competitive mode for this is probably draft/constructed. And then everything kind of blew up a bit, because
Well, we never decided on constructed. We tried a few constructed tournaments, and we realized that constructed is just not a viable option for this game. Because if you can pick your leader and then build your deck, it just gets really ridiculous. So ultimately, we decided that draft was the tournament format for Pixel Tactics.
Yeah,
and that would prevent you from getting a deck that was too powerful.
Yeah. Because people
So
go,
draft really made a big difference with it.
yeah, for sure. And at the end of the day, the draft made it supremely better than constructed, because constructed is just insane, right? It's like wild in Hearthstone at that point.
It's pretty silly.
Yeah.
You just have a bunch of one-turn kill decks. Yeah.
One-turn kill decks. You have a deck that lets you turn your opponent's leader into a different character or something. It's wild. But yeah, overall, draft ended up being better, but at the same time, it still showed some of the cracks behind the thing, right? Because draft lets combinations happen that weren't quote-unquote intended, right? So like what happens when Tatsumi gets access to a bunch of draw cards and gain extra action orders, and suddenly Tatsumi just like takes 15 turns straight, right? Or something like that. It becomes really crazy, and this is something that we've had to keep in check in future editions, right? Especially with the announcement that we made a few episodes ago where we talked about Pixel Tactics Digital, right?
I think the real challenge of Pixel Tactics is that because the game was intended to stand alone, it was intended to be a small game originally, it was built without inherent balancing mechanism. So, for example, in Magic the Gathering, you have your mana costs. In Yu-Gi-Oh, you have like the star ratings where you have to like step summon monsters with sacrifices, that kind of thing. With Pokemon, you have to evolve your pocket monsters over time. Pixel Tactics didn't have anything like that. You have a card in your hand, you can play it. And so the power levels of the cards did not really have any tuning factor. And you can't just use the other sections of the card to balance them. You can't say, well, this guy's got a really strong front effect, so we'll give him a really weak back effect, because players just play him in the front, and the other two effects on the card aren't relevant.
Yeah.
So we've tried various different things throughout the years, and ultimately it came down to just being that bans had to be the way to go. We had to choose some cards that we said these cards are just not appropriate for any kind of formal play. They're just casual cards, and took them out of the
cube.
Yeah, out of the cube. And that's kind of been how Pixel Tactics has been balanced over the years, is by bans as opposed to any kind of backwards balancing like we've done with the BattleCon games, where we've issued patches and such.
Yeah.
While we do issue, updates with some of the reprints of Pixel Tactics, they're mostly wording updates, not really balance updates.
Yeah. The only real quote-unquote balance update was when we went from the original minigame library Pixel Tactics to Pixel Tactics 1, right? Like, that was it.
Yeah, where we eliminated some of those one-turn combos.
Like, Pixel Tactics has no internal balancing mechanism, in the sense that there's no way for us to adjust the power level of a card overall by just tweaking a value, right? Like, you'd have to tweak literally everything on a card in order to reduce its power level. Because if a card is like 0-1 stats and everything is garbage, but the order says draw 4 cards, that would still be the best card ever. And
yeah. Just it only takes one of these effects being a completely house for the card to be overwhelming to the opponent.
Yeah.
The difficulty here is in preventing the cards from becoming monotonous, or preventing them from becoming over complex. And we had some of these issues, especially when we got to Pixel Tactics 3 and a little bit in 4 and 5 as well, in that we didn't have enough effects to prevent the cards from becoming redundant. So we ended up issuing more and more complex effects.
Yeah.
And we're working on scaling that back in the future of Pixel Tactics. At the same time, we also ended up in Pixel Tactics Deluxe with a lot of cards that were probably too similar to each other. And those cards, the commons, are not as interesting to play with. It's something that we ended up solving in Exceed just by planning things to happen as series, so we can introduce new mechanics and see how they work, and then we can rotate out old cards. We don't have to support the legacy of the game forever.
Yeah. But Pixel Tactics didn't end up that way, and I think that's a very interesting case study, where, like, simply planning with the end in mind can mean a load of difference for how a game ends up being, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, imagine if at the start of Pixel Tactics we had just like given some sort of inherent balancing mechanism, or maybe we planned that there would be more effects, so that in Pixel Tactics 1 there were less like a la carte effects, because Pixel Tactics 1 has a lot of a la carte effects, because we were like,
it's got a lot of really strong effects too, like things that just set a power level that it's very hard to improve on, because we imagined it would be the first and the last.
Yeah.
And so we made a card that was like, just kill a hero. And that seemed like, well, there's no other card in the game that does this, so I guess it's fine. But it turns out it's hard to do anything better than just kill a hero. on any of the other cards in the game. We've made a few interesting variations, but they're not. It's hard to side grade that.
Yeah, for sure. Because imagine, like for example, in a game like Hearthstone, right? You have an effect that just says destroy a minion, but then you have another effect that says destroy a damaged minion, right? So both, like, one of them is supremely worse than the other, but as a result, one of them costs less than the other. But how do you do that in Pixel Tactics, where nothing costs anything except actions?
So those are the kind of challenges that come up in Pixel Tactics, and I think our team's done a pretty good job of turning the action economy into a real economy. Creating fast actions that can do lesser things, creating long actions that can do greater things, but it takes your whole turn, and using your card draw in your hand as another source of mana. So a lot of effects that are really good cause you to discard a card as part of the cost. And so that means you basically have to bank one action into it, because drawing a card is also an action.
Yep, cards are actions, are literally, like, the entire game is basically balanced around hand size now, which is really interesting in my opinion, because essentially your quote-unquote mana is cards in hand. And that's a very interesting balancing thing. And we can talk about how we've taken all of these and kind of try to apply it to the balance of our upcoming Pixel Tactics products after the break. Brad, are you okay with taking a break?
Let's take a break.
All right. I'll use my action to take a break.
Use your action to be a gangster.
FanimeCon in the San Francisco Bay Area is coming soon. Come play various tabletop games in the tabletop section, sponsored by Exceed. Play any game and receive a free Ryu vs. Ken demo deck while supplies last. Play in official Exceed organized playside events with other players, and test drive any fighter in the game at our demo tables. Bring your A game and see if you can beat our staff in a game of Exceed. We're looking forward to playing with you there.
Been spending most our lives living in a pixel paradise. Hey, Marco, we back?
Oh my gosh. Picking up my actions, using them for orders. I'm attacking leader.
You're doing the Weird Al one.
Yeah, the Amish paradise, right? Oh my god.
I think that's the better version, personally. But Sonic Movie thinks that Gangster Paradise is.
But Sonic Movie is wrong, right? In every sense of the word. Yeah. Sonic Movie itself is just wrong. It's a blight on this universe.
It is. But you know where the real Gangster's Paradise is.
Brad, the true Gangster's Paradise is obviously in Pixel Tactics.
Yeah, it's more of a Pixel's Paradise. Pixel Paradise, if you will.
I see. I like that. Somebody make pixel art of all the Pixel Tactics character on a beach, killing each other still, because of course it's Pixel Tactics. You have to kill each other.
But everybody's wearing dark glasses and doing Team Skull poses.
Of course, absolutely correct. All of them also need skull bandanas somewhere on their bodies, just for completely accurate sakes. So, Brad, let's talk a little bit about how we balance Pixel Tactics, or at least how we make new cards for Pixel Tactics.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So, obviously, we don't have real balancing mechanisms, since we have to do other things. And we talked a little bit before the break about the economies that exist in Pixel Tactics. The economy of actions and the economy of cards in your hand.
Yes.
And so, those two aspects are what form the basis of most of the differing power levels of attacks or of actions. But there are a huge variety of actions in Pixel Tactics. I think we've got over 150 core cards that are actually in the games, and only a few key effects get repeated over and over, like range attack and intercept.
Yeah.
Other effects are quite diverse.
There doesn't seem to be a lot of middle ground when it comes to Pixel Tactics, right? Your effect is either an evergreen keyword or a unique effect that only you will ever use. It's pretty hard to balance in that way, because it's really hard to create what I would call rotations, or what do you call those? Sets, like in Magic, where there's a bunch of sigils and they all kind of share a common element to them. It's really hard to create a series of cards like that in Pixel Tactics, because they can't just be slightly different, because then one card would just supremely outclass the other. Because the benefits of games like Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone is that cards have identity outside of their effects. for example, color identity, class identity, and stuff like that. In Pixel Tactics, every card can be in every deck. So it's also really hard to just create small side grades because you can't justify it with, oh, but X can't even play that card, so it's fine, right?
Yeah, it's a very different game, and what you see from that really is just a lot of the symptoms of a game that was designed with the intention of being a standalone, but then had to grow. And I think looking back now, I could have grown it a bit better. I could have changed things with Pixel Tactics 2 to make the game a little bit more future-proof.
Yeah.
But we didn't, and we're living with that now. And Pixel Tactics, I think, does pretty fine.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And people enjoy it for the quick, casual play of it and for the completely crazy combos that you can come up with. And that's really the fun of it, is making an obscene combo and seeing it come together and going like, wow, I just, swing for infinite damage, no problem. That kind of thing.
And at the end of the day, I think Pixel Tactics does really well for itself. And as somebody who has had to make a lot of new Pixel Tactics cards, it's really fine to balance something. So here's some considerations that I, as one of the people who helped design Pixel Tactics cards, consider. Because even if a card had draw 4 as an order, for example, if literally everything else on a card sucks, that's one way we've realized we can tune or inherently balance cards. Because in Pixel Tactics, a huge portion of a card's power budget falls into whether or not it's flexible, right? So draw 4 cards might not be the best effect.
Yeah, this is less on the orders, because orders can be played anywhere, and it's more on the hero placements, because the vanguard, flank, rear, the front, middle, and back of the unit, those you have to play those cards at specific times and specific opportunities. And so a card with the hero effects are not all balanced with one another leads to it being weighted in a certain zone, which means that it has more limited times when you can play it. So there are opportunity costs to playing it at the wrong time or playing it in the wrong position.
Which is interesting gameplay, right?
Yeah. So it can lead to interesting gameplay. It can lead to choices where you make a suboptimal play because of the needs of the moment. And it gives you the ability to make more flexible cards also be more appealing, even if they don't have quite the same level of power in specific zones.
Yes, that's true. And I think it also applies to orders, though. However, I think the order I gave is a poor example. So long as the order effect is niche enough but powerful enough, if you make all the other parts of the card a little bit worse because of that strong order, it still balances the card out. So one big example for this would be a card like Divinity. So Divinity is a card in Pixel Tactics, which I think is the Mikhail hero, whose effect is basically you just get to revive everything, so everything comes back to life, right? But the card effect on that is very niche, because not only does it revive your stuff, it also revives the opponent's stuff. And the actual hero itself is not very stellar. So what happens here is that the card is inflexible. You don't want to play it as a hero all the time, and the time for it to be a good order is very limited as well. So you're forced to, again, make suboptimal plays or give up tempo in order to, make the most out of the card that you have in your hand. And losing tempo in Pixel Tactics is a big deal, especially because you can't attack with every hero on the field all the time, right? So, the timing of everything has to fall together in the correct place. And if you are forced to essentially, spend the entire turn just drawing cards, you're not actually developing any board space and you're not giving yourself more actions. And in a tactical strategy game, giving yourself more available actions tends to be the best way to go. And sometimes drawing cards isn't always the best way to get that. So that's another inherent balancing tool that we did. I feel like understanding cards in your hand and tempo tend to be what define Pixel Tactics in terms of the economy.
I think there's one other part of balancing in the order slot, which is worth considering and mentioning here, which is the balance of operations and traps. These are cards that have a big opportunity cost because you're giving up the hero on a trap that may or may not trigger when you mean it to, because your opponent has to take a certain action to trip it, or alternatively playing an operation which you then have to spend the next few turns capitalizing on in order to get full value out of.
Yes.
So those continuous effects and those traps are much less of a sure thing. There are also effects that are quite powerful, but they buff other units, and so it only works if you have the right setup to make it work.
Yeah.
And so these setup-dependent effects are a strong balancing tool as well.
And ultimately, I feel like that's the biggest thing in balance that I've found in Pixel Tactics, is that cards should not be made good on their own. And this is a thing that took us a while to realize, but like essentially, if you asked me, we wouldn't print a second copy of Hikech/Assassin, right? Like
That just says kill a hero.
Yeah, that just says kill a hero. We wouldn't do that unless under very specific conditions, which we may talk about later on, right? Like we wouldn't just print that. We would print something like, kill a damaged hero. That way you would have to think, oh, how can I damage that hero? Oh, I can do that by attacking. Oh, I can do that by playing this other.
One of my favorite ones is actually an operation, and it says, when this operation ends, kill a hero. And so you play it, and then 3 turns later, you get to trigger it. And it's a lot of fun because, A, you still get the effect, but you can't use it right away. But also your opponent doesn't want to play powerful heroes because they know somebody's going to get killed. So there's an intimidation factor, too.
Yeah.
And so I think that card is a much more interesting design than the just kill a hero card.
Oh, for sure. And that card's also really powerful because, again, we talked about, like, most people will be like, oh, yeah, sure, then he can just wait 3 turns and then it's done, and then he can play his heroes again. In Pixel Tactics, waiting 3 turns, doing nothing is...
You're probably dead.
You're dead. You're done. You lost the game. That's the big balance about Pixel Tactics that I found to be very interesting. It's understanding tempo and how that affects card advantage, because those are the only things we can actually tune on cards, which is why we have quick actions, long actions, and regular actions as a quote-unquote cost in mana in order to adjust the card's power level.
Yeah, and I think it forces a lot more creativity in the design, too. So there's certainly a lot of interesting aspects to it once you put your head to the problem and try and balance without using a pure mana source type of balancing.
Yeah, I think it's also a very good exercise. We've been like kind of harping on Pixel Tactics for being a standalone game and not looking to the future too much, but I feel like it's presented a very interesting set of problems that allows us to, do things in a way that is different from most other games or different from most other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that allows us to, create a game experience that's not found everywhere, because like ever since Magic the Gathering and Mana and Hearthstone, every card game's just been, hey, let's put mana in it because that's how everybody else has been doing it. And I feel like
it's an easy and convenient way to achieve balance. But you don't get to see other ways.
Yeah. And I feel like this way that we found is very interesting and could like set a standard, at least in our series of games, for a way to balance games. And sure, it might have presented a problem, but we found solutions that forced us to be creative. Much like how we want our players in Pixel Tactics to be creative as well.
Well, one thing that I think is interesting to learn about Pixel Tactics is that even in the absence of an artificial economy, like mana or gems in Hearthstone, an economy emerges. And that economy determines the tempo of the game, and ultimately it's still a battle for the tempo of your effects, and it's still an economic battle, in a sense, between the players, because you're both trying to achieve the stronger position with the same limited pool of actions and resources. And so effects that warp that economy, things like take an extra action or draw more cards than you're due, those can really change the balance of power. And so we have to be especially careful with those kind of effects. And they've given us a lot of trouble over the years.
Yeah, for sure. And those tend to be the problematic cards. And I think the big thing here is that my heuristic for really OP cards in Pixel Tactics have just been, what here is an order that's good by itself? is essentially what I've boiled it down to. And I think that plays a lot into what you just said, right? It's things you just have to be very wary about, because if you just put them on an order and they're good by themselves and they're overpowering, it's donezo, right?
Yeah. Nothing ought to work entirely in a vacuum.
Yeah.
In this game.
That's
true. And I think that's the real lesson of Pixel Tactics, is bringing together those combos.
Yes, and I feel like that's... So can I talk a little bit about the future of Pixel Tactics and some of the stuff that we're doing?
Yeah. let's talk about it. We're working now on Pixel Tactics Quest,
Oh my gosh,
which
Pixel
is
Tactics
the
Quest.
digital edition.
Yeah, so Pixel Tactics Quest is a 2-player or single-player local co-op game, or PvE. It's PvE and or local co-op against the computer. So this changes a lot of what we had to do for balancing an actual regular Pixel Tactics. So earlier on, I was saying, hey, if we were going to do a future Pixel Tactics, we probably wouldn't print something like defeat a hero or destroy a hero. But Brad, I did.
Now we have a chance to correct the mistakes of the past.
No, but Brad, I did.
You did?
I did.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. No. Settle down. So I believe that the environment of the game changes things a little bit. And the PvE nature of it means that if I put something as powerful as destroy a hero in your deck, that means that I've created challenges for you that are near insurmountable if you don't make use of that very powerful thing that I've put into your deck. Right?
I think that's a good way. That's a good way to do it, because as in PvE, it's nobody's going to feel bad if you throw an overpowered combo on the table or a really strong card. In fact, we can balance specifically with those challenges in mind.
Yes, and in fact, in a PvE environment, you want them to do those overpoweredly strong things, like draw 7 cards, right? Because the only person you have to please here is the player, not the computer. Sure, if the player does something that breaks the game and makes the computer fall to the ground and shrivel into a pile of dust, if the player enjoys that process, we have done our job, you know? And that's why we...
Not to say this game is going to be easy. There are plenty of challenges on the way.
Oh, no, it's not.
So I don't want you to get the wrong impression from Marco's words, but the point he's saying is that we don't have to... It's a game where we intend for you to win eventually.
Yeah.
In a PvE game, you have that advantage, is that you can weight towards one player or the other.
Yeah. So I think that's the cool thing, right? In a PvE environment, we don't have to worry about both sides feeling good. We just have to worry about one side feeling good. And of course, that means that it has to be challenging. But it also means that we can put powerful effects in your deck that would never be printed in physical anymore. Like, if I were making physical cards, like, defeat hero as an order would just not be a thing unless it had some really odd conditions on it, right? But because...
and we also have things like ways to power up your heroes to make them even stronger than their baseline stats.
Yeah.
So we give the players a lot of different tools and advantages, and that you couldn't necessarily achieve in the original Pixel Tactics.
Which is really, really interesting. And I've also taken into account the balance of stuff like that. So, for example, the hero that has defeat a hero as an order, when you upgrade him, that order doesn't change. It just stays the same. So, because it's that powerful already, but also, if you want to buff other aspects of the card so that you can use it as anything but an order, you can. And that's a very interesting line of play that players can take, because now, this really powerful card has a decision rather than just, I order it all the time. And what if the character or enemy you're fighting, I've designed so that that order doesn't even work because they're all immune to getting instantly killed, right? So things like this factor a lot into it. One thing that we've been kind of messing with, Brad, is the introduction of this thing called orbs, which is an inherent balancing mechanism in itself.
Yeah, but we originally planned to make Pixel Tactics a competitive game. We introduced a currency specifically for orders, because orders can be so strong and they just happen, and your opponent doesn't really have a response to them. So giving the player sort of a currency to spend on these orbs, or on these orders, was one of the things that we tested out in the early game. And we haven't decided if we're going to do it in Pixel Tactics Quest yet.
Yeah.
But it is a tool we have at our disposal.
Yes.
And if we ever do a PvP Pixel Tactics game, we may eventually decide to put it in.
Yeah. I'm kind of apprehensive about putting it in Pixel Tactics Quest because it's a PvE game, so we can just, like I said earlier, it's okay to not have those orders. But if we're ever planning to move and transition into an actual PvP game, we might have to use orbs, because some of the orders that just exist and some of the cards... Because Pixel Tactics is kind of a weird game where games either are really short or really long and there's barely any in-between because of the way that the effects are placed. Because if you draw into all your powerful effects, you blow out the opponent. But if you don't, it becomes like a game of, hey, let's just keep drawing until we get our powerful effects. All right. And it becomes really, really frustrating to deal with that in a PvP sense. So orbs kind of help us tune that down. Because, again, if both players decide that tempo is not important, the game just drags on. And for a digital game, that's not very good. For a physical game, it's fine, because you're expecting the game to be 20 minutes anyway. But imagine if every game you played in a video game was 20 to 25 minutes long, right?
Well, it also allows us to create a few more interesting leader powers, too, that can interact with this new currency.
Of course.
So there's that. There's also that aspect of it. And some of the leader powers, which were really powerful bonus actions, can now spend this currency, so they're tuned a little bit better too. So there's a lot of reasons to use it, and I don't know if that's the final form it'll take, but it is something that we've played around with for balancing.
I mean, overall, one of the biggest problems for Pixel Tactics is that there's just not enough stuff to balance things with, and adding that internal resource might actually be good. And I think orbs are a good way to do it, because they only really affect orders and or operations and or traps. So it doesn't actually affect like summoning heroes and attacking and all that stuff. And I feel like it puts the reins on like the most problematic part of the system.
And the good orders tend to be fine. Honestly, it's just the bad ones.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a few bad apples that just like taint it. Like there's like maybe 10 out of the 150 cards that are problematic. I mean, like at the end of the day, that's a small number. So Brad, I'm really excited to get on with the Pixel Tactics talk and to talk to everyone about Pixel Tactics. Oh, did we ever tell people that I was the developer?
That you were doing the next Pixel Tactics game?
Yeah, like maybe I just been running my mouth off for 20 minutes with people.
I think you've just been running off, and people are like, why is Marco talking so much? Because like, what kind of games does Marco make?
Yeah,
but in fact, Marco is the designer for the next Pixel Tactics game after Legends, which has already been put together, and we'll probably go to testing later on this year.
Oh, I'm so excited.
So if you want to test a game by Marco, you can join playtesting, and you can try it out.
And you can finally do it's all Marco's fault, and Marco does the balancing meme.
All the Marco memes can truly come to life.
So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the New Level Cap podcast. I'm really excited that all of you got to hear about some of the games that I'm really passionate about, because we don't get to talk about Pixel Tactics enough, and I'm really glad we were able to highlight it in this episode. So thank you so much for listening. As usual, that's been me, your host, Marco DeSantos, also known as the Mechanic Tactics. And with me has been my really tactical co-host,
Brad Talton, the strategy to Marco's Tactics.
Oh, great. I thought you were going to call yourself Brad Tactics Jr.
Yeah, together we're the Super Tactics Bros.
Super Tactics. Oh, Marco the Strategy and Brad Tactics Jr.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I kind of want like pixel versions of us doing the Team Skull poses with those subtitles.
Time to hire Fabio to make us art. Regardless, if you love this episode, share it with a friend, and if you hate it, share it with an enemy. Thank you so much, and thank you, World of Indians. Thank you, and good night.
And as always, happy gaming.
Happy gaming.
The New Level Cap podcast is produced by Level 99 Games. Join us next Wednesday for more design talk and shenanigans. Thank you for listening.